Hello there again, and welcome to my final video in my X-wing model build series. And today I'll be covering the final detailing and weathering of the model. But first off, the one thing I want to finish is this little Rebellion medallion that came with the kit that was supposed to be on the base for the kit. And I'm going to take some neutral gray paint here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the sponge technique. Got a sponge here, and just dip it in the paint, dab off a little excess, and I'm just going to go around this medallion, and I just want to weather this thing up a little bit and make it look a little scratched up and nicked and such. Then I'm going to use some of this Valllejo dark rust wash, and I'm going to do the same thing. Just go around with the sponge and just a little bit. It's a little harder for that to show up, but it's there. And I'm even going to add a little bit of Model Master's green to it. Kind of a moldy type of mossy color on top of the chipping. Then I'm going to give it a coat of flat paint. And then I'm going to come in here with some Tamiya pastels of light sand and mud and just kind of dirty up the whole thing a little bit. Give a little highlights around the edges of the medallion. And I kind of like the way this is turning out. So it's eventually just going to be glued into position right here on the top of the base. So moving on to the model itself, you'll notice here in my reference photo there's these black stripes on the top side of the port lower wing. And there's actually some decals that come with the kit. And I'm going to be using some of these decals to finish off some of the detailing before I start weathering. So I'm going to start out with those black stripes, and I'm going to apply some Microscale Microset solvent here to the wing. And I've got the decal that's been soaking in water here, and I'm just going to slide it off into position, and that Microset will help me place it and help it seal to the model. Then I'm going to continue on with some other decals. I have got these ones here for the lower wing of the starboard side. There's this darker stripe towards the front here, then the gray one, and this brownish colored one here. Also a couple decals on the port side lower upper wing. And these black ones on a couple of the laser cannons. And because the decals pop so much, I'm going to tone them down with some Tamiya Light Sand pastel and snow pastel just to make them look a little weathered. And speaking of weathering, I'm going to start moving on to my engines here. And what I'm going to do is use some Tamiya soot pastel and also oil pastel, and I'm just going to start going around each of the engines and just start smearing it on there and darkening them up and making them look like they're all burnt and charred from the engine heat. And you can see here I've got all four of them done, and they're starting to come to life. And you'll also notice in this reference I have there's some dark areas all up and down the engine. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue on with my pastels to tone it down, though I will be using some wash later. In this reference, down the entire midsection of the upper rear portion here, you'll notice how dark that is. And again, around the portion of the engines there, how dark it is. So I'm going to go ahead and start out with some Tamiya medium gray and do a wash down the upper portion center and down the engines to tone it and darken it. Then I'm going to continue on with a German gray wash to add a little bit darker tones throughout. And you can see here it's really starting to pop and come to life and add depth to it. Also going to do some German gray wash on the back side of the X-wing here. And you also notice in my reference there's a lot of rust down the midsection. There's some rust around various areas of the engines here on both sides of the engines. So I'm going to continue on doing a wash of rust using Valllejo dark rust wash with just a touch of Valllejo yellow in there to lighten it up a bit so it's not quite as dark, because it's a little orangey on the reference. And I'm just going to go ahead and start going around and adding it in the appropriate places to match the filming miniature as close as possible. And also adding some around a little bit of portion of the wings around the engine. So now I'm going to continue on and do some battle damage using German gray. And I'm just going to start going around the model and using a very fine tip brush to do the battle damage and match as close again as possible to my reference photos of the actual filming miniature used for the movie. Just starting out on the upper port side wing here. And here's the result of that. And the starboard upper wing, and some around the engine areas. Then continuing on doing damage on the bottom portion of the X-wing. And that's how that's looking. And again, I'm just going to continue on and go around the entire ship doing the rest of the wings, the underside of the wings. And my final stage will be to go around and airbrush, doing all the weathering and battle streaking with airbrush. And once again, trying to match as closely as possible to the filming miniature. And here I'm airbrushing the torpedo launch tube to darken that up from the heat from the torpedoes firing, and just dig out my little piece of putty here so that my LED will light up. And continuing on with the bottom, and I'm just going to work my way around the entire ship. And I've pretty much done the entire ship now. I think I'm calling this finished. So this is going to do it for this video, and my next video will actually be the final reveal of the completed model with the full paint job and all the working electronics. So once again, thanks for watching this video, and I will see you next time.